All right, and here we are talking about place of articulation. Remember, we're talking about consonants, and we're talking about where those speech sounds are made. A couple of things you're going to need to do. We've talked about articulators. You're going to see some definite references to articulators, but when we talk about place of articulation, there will be times when parts of the oral structure are referred to. Here it is. Look at this. Teeth. Teeth are not an articulator, but teeth are used in the making of consonants because that is oftentimes a place where the constriction of air happens. So do not get confused with this. We're going to be talking about some things we just talked about a few minutes ago. We're going to talk about lips. There they are. Tongue. We're going to talk about the velum or the soft palate. But notice that we're not going to, in this particular schema, we're not going to talk about the jaw, even though the jaw does move. I really want you to try and spend a little bit of time wrapping your head around. There's a difference between what moves, articulators, and where in the oral structure we are involving this constriction of air. So there'll be a little crossover, but it'll be really important. If I ask you, are teeth an articulator, you will say no. But yet, teeth, or dental is how they're going to be referred to, are involved as we make speech sounds, and they don't move, but they are involved and they're going to come up in this terminology. So bilabial, two lips. Labia means lips, bi means two, so there you are with your p, b, m, w sound. Then moving on to labiodental, you have your lip and your teeth involved. Now of course people always say, well, which lip, which teeth? Well, try it. Bottom lip to top teeth, that's your f and your v sound. Just for fun, you could try your top lip to bottom teeth. It's comical. Get out a mirror, try that. But it's not going to make any speech sound that you're used to seeing. So when we talk about labiodental, it is definitely bottom lip, top teeth, and the only two sounds that happen at that intersection of the oral structure are the F like Frank sound and the V like Victor sound. All right, let's move back in the mouth just a little bit. Let's not forget linguadental, just tucked up in there. Lingua, tongue, dental, teeth. So when the tongue touches the, again, top teeth, if you touch your bottom teeth with your tongue, nothing's going to happen. So touch your tongue to your top teeth, and that's where you get the TH sound like therapy. But if you add your voice box, it's then, there. So TH is only indicated there one time, but it actually, when we get back to voiced and unvoiced concepts, you're going to actually have two different speech sounds there. It's just one is voiced, one is unvoiced. All right. So lingua alveolar, that is tongue and the alveolar ridge. Now, assuming that you have a clean thumb and you haven't been out working on your car today or whatnot, I guess if you have been, you'll need to take a minute to Purell that thumb, but take your thumb and put it right behind your top teeth. That ridge is called the alveolar ridge, and an easy way to remember that is that that's the part that gets burned when you put a hot piece of pizza in your mouth and you chomp down on it. You end up burning your alveolar ridge. So look at those speech sounds that are actually made at the alveolar ridge. So there's the T like Tom, D, D like David, S like sing, Z like zing, and then we have N and L. So all of those happen. Now some people will say, wait a minute, T and D make sense because I can feel my tongue touching the alveolar ridge. But what about the sing and zing? Well, remember, it's not necessarily that one part of the oral structure touches the other, it's that that's the place where the constriction of air sounds, or the constriction of air happens. So in this case, the alveolar ridge is where the constriction of air happens with the S and the Z sound. Now also think about the N and the L sound as well. And so all those are happening with the constriction of air happening where the lingua meets the alveolar ridge, or the tongue meets the alveolar ridge. So when we just jump back down, remember we've got that schematic too. Everything that I'm telling you right here on our headshot just as transposed down onto this schema. All right, we're going to go back to our headshot because I like visual. All right, so then we move back in the oral structure a little bit more, and we get to palatal. And there's your sh and your zh and your cha and your ya. So all of those sounds, or the ja sound I should say, ja. And then you also have the ya sound as well. So we have quite a few things that are happening. There's that ya sound and there's a r. So notice there across the palatal, and your book actually, when we go to this schematic, your book, notice how it actually talks about palatal or post-alveolar, and so that can get a little bit goofy in terms of just exactly what are we talking about here. So that's really important that you're able to kind of keep that in mind, that we can have a couple of different ways of talking about the same thing. All right, so looking at that whole list though, here you see the ya and the and the sh and the zh and cha and ja, like Joe. Cha would be cherry and ja would be Joe. Okay, so all of those have to do with the lingua and the palatal area actually getting involved. And again, your book also talks about post-alveolar, which kind of makes sense. After the alveolar ridge, you know, it's right there, so it kind of makes sense that these would happen post or after the alveolar ridge. I do just want to make sure that I think I misspoke when I told you what page this schematic is on. I think I said it was on page 27. It's actually on page 28. There is another schematic that's in your Clark manual that is on page 27. It also talks about place of articulation as well, and so it gives you some of these actual titles, and it recapitulates the speech sounds and whether they're voiced or unvoiced. But this particular schematic that we're looking at now really just is focusing on, all right, which speech sounds are made at these particular places in the oral structure. Now, one of the things I want to mention to you right now is that when you see these titles, bilabial, labiodental, linguodental, and so on, remember that you're going to need to attach this list to this concept, place of articulation. If it helps you to remember this, face, place, and then that can get you on the right road to what you need to be talking about, that's going to help you down the line when I'm asking you. I might give you on a quiz or on the midterm, I might give you the consonant or the sound p, and I would say, all right, tell me the place of articulation. Well, right now that's all we're covering, so it's kind of easy to remember, but when I start getting manner of articulation into the mix, then it might get a little dicey. So in order for you to remember these topics and how they're related to the concept of place where they're made, think place, face, and maybe that will help you out. All right, so there's that lingua palatal. We're moving on, and now we are going to head now to lingua alveolar, and so we definitely want to look at those sounds. And like I said, the concept around kangaroo is definitely going to be harder for our oral deaf folks to kind of be able to see, and probably also to replicate when they're trying to learn to make these speech sounds. They're happening way back in the throat. So ka, ga, ing, and ha. So try to make all those individual speech sounds as you're just sitting there listening to the screencast, because those individual speech sounds all happen where the constriction of air occurs with the tongue velum, or we also refer to them as lingua velar. Okay, so lingua velar is our official title, but it's that tongue connecting with the velum, which, remember, is the soft palate. Okay, so that's kind of a lot to start thinking about. Like I said, we're just covering, basically, we're on that first stick of the tripod. We've covered place of articulation. When we get together in class next week, we're going to talk about manner of articulation. Then we're going to move on to voiced or voiceless, and that, actually, the voiced or voiceless is quite easy. But all we're really focusing on for today is this concept around the place of articulation. And remember, place, face, and that's going to help you as you start to think about going through methodically and trying to remember how each of these is described. And most importantly, you're going to need to know some basic speech sounds. So if I give you a D, like David, and I say, all right, tell me the place of articulation, you're probably going to sit there on the quiz or the midterm and you're going to say, duh, duh. And you're going to think, duh, I can feel my tongue touching my alveolar ridge. Oh, I bet that is lingua dental. And so, or I'm sorry, not lingua dental, lingua alveolar. Or if I said the TH sound, like in that, and I said, tell me the place of articulation there, then that's where you would say, okay, let me make the TH sound. It is in fact my tongue touching my teeth. That's lingua dental. So, and if I give you the ing sound, that's probably going to be a little harder, because when you sit there and make that ing, if you're really attuned to the fact that it's involving your velum or your soft palate, and you're of course realizing that your tongue is involved as well, then you are likely to be able to pull that that's a linguovelar sound. So what you'll basically get to the point where you can eventually do is, on any given speech sound, I'll be able to ask you, first of all, what's the place of articulation? Where is it made? Then I'll ask you, how do you make it? And we'll get to that in our next lecture. And then the last thing I'll say is it voiced or unvoiced? And some of them are only voiced. Like we said the other day, wah, wah is only voiced. We don't have any unvoiced version of the wah sound, because it would be a very breathy sounding wah if we did. So there's a few consonants that really just, they either come voiced or unvoiced, and they don't really have a pair. But then there's a number of pairs, and we'll be talking through those. And like I said, when you look at the mother of all speech production schemas, here you go. This is basically going to tell you on any given speech sound the place of articulation. We're going to get to, in one of our future lectures, the manner of articulation. So look at these terms here, because that's what you're going to be learning next. And then voiceless or voiced, you can see how they're done on these columns, will tell you whether or not these have a voice attached to them or an unvoice. So basically, when I'm going to ask you about the tripod, I'm going to be needing you to have a pretty good working definition of this particular table. And like I said, that's on page 34 of your Clark manual. All right, well, that's a good start on speech production. Now in class you're going to play a little bit of a knockoff on the game Cranium, and you're going to basically be using the concepts of the intro to speech production video that I made, as well as this one, and you'll have a chance then to put this knowledge into use before we go on to tackle the rest of the concepts. All right, well, have fun with the Cranium game, and we'll see you in class next week. Thanks.